Welcome to this panel discussion. The topic building data-driven organization. All of you are, of course, experienced in different industries, and you come with experience in manufacturing, finance, and other areas. I am sure that the audience will be able to receive valuable insights into this topic, which is very much, you can say, relevant for the current day. Now, I will briefly introduce the panelists for the benefit of the audience. Later on, necessary, the panelists can add anything more which they think is relevant. Then I will be giving a brief introduction on the theme, and then we will go for the questions addressed to one or two of you on different relevant topics. We can start with Mr. Sachin Jain, who is the Global CIO and CISO of Evalueserve, a person who has been in the company for quite some time, 20 years now, right from the inception. A very loyal person who must be knowing everything about the company right from the beginning. Very rare to find such a person today in the so he carries with him the experience of IT and ITES. He is an MBA from Symbiosis Institute of Management Studies. He is also an ISB alumni. And Sachin, we look forward to your interaction as a consultant in the data analytics area, which I understand is one of your basic activities at this point of time. We also have Sonali, Subudhi, again a person with nearly 20 years of experience, all in data analytics and leadership exposure in the areas of marketing, risk. She is one of the persons who comes from the banking area and well exposed to card business, fraud, payment solutions, all those areas of BFSI where data is actually changing a lot of things. In fact, I am also from the banking industry in the early part of my career. I was working in Indian Overseas Bank in Mumbai. So I look forward to interacting with you on various aspects. Sonali has also worked in Citibank, Bank of America. Briefly, I think she also was in Vodafone and Johnson & Johnson. So she has a very wide-ranging experience in different industries. So, Madam, we look forward to your interaction and your wise interactions and knowledge in this particular field. Then we have Mr. Kunal Mehta from Fab India Overseas. Until recently, perhaps he was in the Raymond's group and carries more than 20 years of experience in retail and manufacturing sector. He was responsible for enterprise IT operations, digital transformation, and IT strategy. Very much relevant for us.
I've just moved to Tata Consultancy Services as a program director.
And Kunal also is very much interested as a startup mentor. So I think it is his passion. So we look forward to having his insights into this interesting topic. Yeah. Then we have Sivasubramanian from VA Tech, Wabag, Global CIO at this point of time. Again, a person with nearly 20 years of experience in major corporates. Again, an MBA and his MBA from in information systems with a specialization, I suppose. So he's one of the current generation MBAs. I don't know earlier whether MBAs had information system as a specialization. I'm not aware, but anyway, fine. He has been certified in several courses from IIM, close to my place, Bangalore, and a digital strategist. And he also holds a diploma in cyber law, which is also an area of my special interest. So he has worked in several organizations within L&T, I think. So he is very much exposed to different aspects of manufacturing. So Sivasubramanian, we look forward to your insights into this topic. Now we have the senior person, Mr. who is working in Jindal Steel and Power Limited as Group Chief Information Officer. And again, his vast experience goes across manufacturing, telecom, infra services, even financial services. So we have another person with the experience in credit card, home loan, and commercial loan business. He has also been into software consulting and related activities. He has worked in different IT roles, starting with Technic Computers, one of the early entrants into the industry. He has been in GE Global Research. He has worked in GE Capital, and as part of GE Capital, like he has worked on SBI cards. So we have a person with extensive experience in the field of finance and related areas. So welcome, Mr. Saurabh. Now, so friends, it is nice to have all of you here. I am only a moderator. Only my responsibility is to set the context and then try to discuss with you and try to get your insights into the various aspects. Now, the topic which we have chosen for this panel discussion is building data-driven organization. So all of you are actually working in organizations where over a period of last 2 decades, you have seen how the importance of data has grown. Okay. Now, I'm sure that when you started your career, perhaps in manufacturing companies, we were thinking of more plant and machinery, land and building kind of a thing. Data was perhaps not there, or it was there in HR department or something like that. So limited use of data in the actual work environment. But from there, if you look at it today, we are even changing the manufacturing process to suit the data related issues. So we have seen a vast change in the way companies have looked at data. It is no longer just a finance department's work or a HR department's work. It has come into CNC machines, into the manufacturing. And I don't know if any of you are handling 3D printing kind of a thing. So entire manufacturing sector has undergone a lot of change, and we will have discussions on some of these various aspects. But to discuss on building a data-driven organization, we need to first come to a common consensus and understanding on the concept of data. Okay, first of all, the concept of data, then we will know how an organization can try to use data and make whatever changes it wants. So if a technologist, if you ask him what is data, perhaps he will say it is a binary kind of a document. His vision perhaps is that. So when you are talking of a AI algorithm writer or somebody of that nature, that is, who is deeply involved in coding, he looks at every data as a binary stream. Okay, for him, personal data, non-personal data, intellectual property data, industry data, that doesn't make any difference. You tell him that I want this particular data in this particular form to be delivered to such and such roles, he will be able to do that. But beyond that, he feels that a technologist doesn't have to look at the end use of the data. See, when the technologist, for the best use of data in the manufacturing process, the technologist should also be a business person. Then only he will be able to look at the vision. So either the business person should go back, interact with the technology person and ensure what he wants is there in the structure of the code. Otherwise, the coding person will have to take extra interest in understanding the business process, and thereby he will be able to deliver what is required. So that is something which is associated with the data. We say data in the beholder's eyes. What I mean by that is, data all said and done is nothing but binaries. Okay, but when I look at data, if I am the marketing person, I look at it in a particular way. Finance person will look at it in a different way. A fraud person will look at it in a different way. Security person. So the way we perceive data will depend on our own requirement of what data is required for us. Now, when we talk of manufacturing companies in a data-driven organization, we are basically looking at using data for the purpose of decision making. That is, to improve the quality of our decision making. So, if you are a manager in charge of a particular business, if you feel that if you had this kind of an information or this kind of an analysis, if I had got a global information about how this industry has done or something like that, it would be good for your decision making. If that is what is given by your IT department, then that is where you start respecting data and you become a data driven organization. Now, in the industry 4.0 kind of a situation, we anticipate that workstations will all be changing over from human led workstations to robotic workstations, and that happens, then we are talking of data working in a different way. That is, the sensors associated with each of these machines will be sending some data back to the server, and the server will decide whether the grid has to go further or it should stop, the speed has to be increased or decreased, kind of a thing. So data in that sense actually drives the production process. In fact, if you go to the medical kind of industry, remote, you can say surgery is conducted where the surgeon's scalpel is actually moved by the data. So we know now the importance of data being accurate, because in a normal situation, if data is inaccurate, okay, you can say there is a small managerial decision which may go wrong. But in critical areas like medical, if the data goes wrong, then you are looking at a life and death situation. This is where data is used as a tool of productivity. Okay. Compared to this, you have companies like, say, Google or Facebook, where we will talk, where data is taken and it is modified into a value-added data. In fact, intellectual property right also is based on that principle, that data can be transformed into a better form. Just like in an engineering company, we change the raw material into a finished goods, data also changes from raw data to something like a personal data, sensitive personal data, or say a report, a survey, or something like that. Here, the data is actually itself becomes a useful product for the company. So this is one type of data driven organizations where data is itself the you can say the driving force for the business, as compared to in some other cases where data is a decision making a tool. Now, if you want to be the person who governs data in a manner in which it is beneficial to the organization, you need to first of all know how much of data you have in your organization. So this is one of the first exercises which we have to do in data, in building the data-driven organization. We have to identify what data is available and what data in transformed state it can become. What is AI or what is ML? This is something which the manufacturing engineer also should be aware, so that he can demand the right kind of a thing from the IT person. So knowing the data assets in an organization is perhaps one of the first steps in building this data-driven organizations. And there are, of course, we normally come across a lot of organizations who buy data from outside. Whether you are in that category, you only have to tell. This is what is the scenario in which all of you are working in different industries. Let us now start with our initial kind of thought process about what is the ideal way of building a data-driven organization according to you with your experience. So probably now Mr. Sachin can start this. What is the ideal way of building a data-driven organization according to you, Mr. Sachin?
Yeah, thank you, Naavi said, and thank you, TV, for having me. Uh, as you rightly mentioned, when you were talking, I could relate multiple points around how data has evolved over the last 2 decades and how the consumption has also changed. And the trends we see, especially in last 8 to 10 years, and how data has become more meaningful for the organizations and how it has given more powers to the board, to the investors for decision making. And one of the key factors, in my view, which has strongly emerged for all the data-driven organization, whether it's manufacturing, logistics, maybe banking, I think everywhere. And some organizations, I think, were quite ahead on their journey in terms of taking that meaningful perspective of the data. But for many companies, especially when they become too big and probably globally dispersed organizations, it becomes very impossible. And I've personally seen many organizations, including our own organization, where when you grow in multiple business units and you accumulate a lot of data, and what happens then you create multiple sources of truth also in that organization, and that's where the confusion starts, and that's where uh, this whole mess around the data-driven decision making, which at times may not fall at the right place. And that's where what I personally feel that, and this is what we have taken as a project also with many of our clients, where we do a data strategy project where we understand how the data is used within the organization, what are the different sources of truth, how do you convert that into a single source of truth, and from there you actually help all the business units and all different functions of the organization to take a meaningful perspective of the data. And then it revolves around how do you build those data governance practice, how do you build the quality of data, and how the data is getting consumed through different sources. I'll take a stop here and then probably maybe have other panelists to share their
Probably Mr. Saurabh can add to what Mr. Sachin has been talking of. Now, if you want to build a data-driven organization, where do you actually start? How do you actually build up?
It's a fantastic question, Naavi, and Sachin. You said it right. The moment we expand the horizons, the definition gets a different meaning, right? And in fact, just reflecting back of what Navi was just explaining, right? It can be the data resides in any organization in multiple places. It can be unstructured data, which is there in Excels. It can be structured data, which is there in SAP system or Oracle ERP systems. And then there are this sensors data, which is there on, if it is manufacturing, it is in machines, if it is banking, it may be mainframe or some other financial systems. So these are different layers of data, right? How do you combine them together sets the right tone for a data-driven organization, right? Two important things in my opinion. First is culture of data, right? And culture of data, and Navi touched on this very briefly, where he talked about how are people getting engaged from the business side to be able to understand that how to use the data is very, very important. Otherwise, what happens is the technologists go and say, I want to apply machine learning algorithm, but they really don't know what will come out of it, right? So it's not about, so I think first is get rid of the buzzwords, right? If you want to get into a data-driven organization, data-driven culture in the organization, get rid of the buzzwords, start with the fundamentals, right? Let's see what data is available. Is it available in the right way? Do we have one source of truth? Do we have data integrity? If these fundamentals are right, then you have to do the correlations to understand correlating which data will give you what output, right? A simple example again, and I'm using a lot of examples so that it becomes easier for people to correlate, right? A macroeconomic factor of what is the input you are going to consume in any industry, right? can be a driver for your behavior of operations cost, right? But the output, and also maybe some to some level sales and marketing, but the operational process itself will be dependent completely on the ERP or the census data, right? So the sources become different, but there is always a very deep correlation, and I don't think so that it will be very unfair to say that that any organization can reach the peak of it. There is no end to it, right? And there's a very famous saying: "What got you here will not get you there." Right? So it completely applies to every organization. A data-driven organization culture can only be built by identifying these sources, collecting the data at the right place, building the culture wherein people from the business understand that why this data is getting collected, what can we do with this data so that they can ask the right questions. It cannot be a technology program. It has to be a business and technology program. And I'm explicitly saying it, businesses and technology, because business has to take lead. They have to ask for it, right? And the way they have to ask it is, you don't have to go and tell some complex algorithms, ML algorithms, to say this algorithm will work, that algorithm will work. It's the other way around. You have to ask them, what is the problem which I should solve, right? Now, to solve the problem, there can be multiple things. That's how data-driven culture can be built in an organization. That's my point of view, Mr. Naavi.
Thank you,
I think
Saurabh. Very good point. Yeah. Yes, Sivasubramanian.
I think so. To add to what Saurabh, I think Sachin also covered the end to end. I think one missing link is that it has to the organization culture has to be the top down approach. So this whatever we are talking about data driven, this whatever that culture cannot come from bottom to up. So it has to be top down. So the unless the management thinks that it is going to add value, and if they are not seeing any decisions which is not on the kind of feeling basis or the gut feel basis or whatever is through the experience, instead of that, they should, when they start looking at from the facts and figures, then that is where it starts. Then obviously what tool and what is that kind of team and what is the kind of output. Obviously there is a concept of gigo. So whatever the garbage goes in, that's what is obviously going to come out. So it has to start from the top management. So though you may be having a great tool and maybe having a lots of analytics and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it is not useful to the business. If it is not giving the right insights, then it is not going to be a great kind of culture in the organization. So it has to be in the top down. If any right from the senior most man in the organization says that I don't want to see any of the information through the Excels and presentation, that is where the culture start kind of growing.
Okay. So you highlight the importance of the involvement of the top management in the early decision making of whether your organization should be data driven or you are happy with being personality driven. Okay, so you were saying what to be done. Fine, I think perhaps Sonali will be able to speak more about it because she is working in a banking organization. She has come from IT as a parallel this thing, so she comes with her
I
own
think she
vision.
can't speak on the gut feelings. She can only speak from the facts and figures.
Okay, so that experience of transforming an existing organization is different from building a organization from zero, and you sometimes have the advantage where your organization understands IT, and therefore it becomes easy for you to put in various kind of suggestions. Whereas a traditional organization like a bank, that too we know the history of IDBI Bank, though it has changed, it was once a organization which was only into long-term financing. Now it has become a general bank. Now, but I am sure that even today there are people at the top of the bank who are from the earlier generation. Okay, so when technologists start working with them, this transforming the existing organization, which is not so data driven, into something as an acceptable data driven organization is a different kind of challenge. Now, let me try to hear from Sonali how in their organization they are bringing in the transformation to this status of a IDBI bank being a data driven organization.
Thank you, Mr. Naavi. To touch upon key important points. As you rightly mentioned, so we as an organization was obviously not data centric long back, but right now the things are changed. I'll answer some key forces which are driving an enterprise or a bank or an organization become a data driven organization. First thing, a need for real time action. I can say that. So gone are those days where we used to wait for money to go from one bank to other bank in 2-3 days. So right now, customer needs it immediately. So I can tell about my experience when I'm sending money from one bank to other. I just keep on. I mean, do a alt tab to see in my system whether I have received that money within 2 minutes or not. So I mean, we are that impatient right now. So need for real time action is important. Second, interconnected ecosystem. No one goes to bank site to purchase something. Customer goes to retail site or any e-commerce website like Amazon, Flipkart, wherever you are shopping actually to do this or do some purchase. And the customer expects the bank to remain available there in the background to facilitate their transaction. This need has forced the bank to be on the retail side as well. So interconnected ecosystem is quite important. Finally comes the seamless banking. The people expect the bank or any retail site or any other experience to be as seamless as possible. That is, it should be invisible. I mean, it should be quite invisible. Means seamless banking, you can say. So these are the concept. I mean, I can say the key forces are driving an enterprise or company to become data driven. So there comes the next question, as Mr. Naavi rightly mentioned. I mean, why we want to be like data driven? We are being, I mean, like this since maybe many decades now, if not centuries. So why we want to be data driven? So there are foremost, I mean, how do we create an infrastructure to support the data driven organization? There are four most important aspects I can just call out here. First is data consolidation. Data cannot be in silos. We cannot have customer data in one system and transaction data in another system. Different data set must talk to each other. We must be aware that what is happening in one part of the database system in other part of the data produce the consistent time sensitive result. So data consolidation is quite important. Second comes the accessibility. One may have the best of the data warehouse, you can say best of the data lake or maybe cloud in place, but if it is not accessible to people, it is it is of no use. Hence, after consolidation, accessibility comes a second most key important factor. Now these days, with open banking in place, our data system are exposed to the world of aggregators, retail giants, you can say e-commerce giants. So integration is critical both inward and as well as the world of outward data, where API, open microservice comes into picture. So in entirety, this concept of DASH, that is data as a service, comes into picture. So third point I can talk about making sense of the data. This is where our business engine, or you can say rule engine, our AI ML model comes into picture. This is actually the brain of the entire system. For example, there is a customer who is doing a crore rupees transaction who has never done this before. Our machine learning risk scoring model should tell that it looks like a fraud before the transaction hits my processor. That is the role of intelligent layer comes. Here the intelligent layer comes actually. So finally, the fourth point I can say, how do you present it to the user? Again, you could have all intelligence in your system, intelligence in your maybe in the bank, but how to present it to the client or the end user? Here comes the role of the different digital channel like mobile app, omni-channel app, any app you can talk about for delivery or consultation. This tool helps streamline our last leg of effort to make relevant information available to customer. So in short, I can say data consolidation, accessibility of the data, rules by AI ML, optimization and enhancement of digital channel are the key concept of data driven organization. I hope I have summarized a couple of points.
Yeah, thank you, Sonali, for summarizing it. Now I'll go to Mr. Kunal. See, two of the things which people have spoken is about culture of the organization to say take on data as its main decision-making tool. Okay, and then the quality of data. So there are 2 points which have come out. Now, in your organization, how do you address these kind of issues?
So I think one of the panelists already mentioned, right? You need to look at data in its entirety, right? You cannot have your customer data lying somewhere else, and you cannot have your sales data lying somewhere else, right? All this data kind of needs to be there in a middleware which is accessible, and you're having the right set of analytics, which is working across the different business functions. Also, I think the whole KPI around each of this needs to be very well defined within the business. We talked about the top to bottom approach, right, of how the data needs to be looked at. And that's extremely, extremely important, because if you're not asking the questions at the top, right, people down the line or down the chain are never going to be able to ask those questions in the first place. And that again brings back to the same thing, that having data consolidated in a well organized fashion within the business becomes extremely important. In retail, what I've seen in most of the places is that the data has been lying across different sectors, because you're selling something on the e-commerce platforms, you're selling something in your stores, you're selling something through B2B. How are we getting all this data into a single platform and making meaning out of it is extremely, extremely critical, especially in these times, because now the channels have changed. In retail, until a year and a half back, you had your offline sales or your store sales as the main way of communicating to the customer or getting the customers to the store to talk to you and buy products from you. All of a sudden, during the COVID, your e-commerce business has taken out, right? And so your channels have changed. The way you do your marketing has completely changed, right? It's no more about the normal offline media and communication and SMSs that you're talking about, right? You're using Google Ads, you're using Facebook, you're using social media to connect with your customers. And hence, again, where your customer is buying, what is he buying, the preferences that you have, the way you're looking at the data across different mediums and channels, during which day of the day, which hour of the day is the customer buying it, or is it weekdays or is it weekend? All of this information now needs to be in a central location. People need to relook at the way they used to view the data before and the way they view the data now, right? And hence, the way the analytics is done, all of that is done now within every business function across the organization has changed. So I think that's a constant battle for all of us, not just in retail, but for all sectors, even if it's banking or manufacturing. The way we perceive data, I think there's a constant change attached to it. And we need to keep re-looking at it every probably 6 months, 1 year down the line, in terms of how are we looking at the data, how are we looking at the KPIs, how are we processing this data, in a centralized manner, and utilizing it.
Okay, thank you. Sivasubramanian, I have some question for you. Now, a couple of you have highlighted the importance of data centralization for effectiveness of being a data-driven organization. That is, instead of it lying in silos, you should be able to access it in one single place. Now, when you handle data, you also have two other parameters to consider. One is the security. Okay, now in retail segment, particularly when data is flowing from hundreds of retail shops coming to me, and I don't know what is the level of security in the retail shop, but my server is connected to that shop. So I don't know whether they have all the security knowledge to ensure that they don't use the same computer for some personal work or something like that. It is like your BYOD kind of a scenario. Ultimately, you are talking of all traders and others who get connected. Now, we are talking of centralization of data. Now, the second aspect is that we are into a scenario where I think Kunal was talking about we need to understand what time of the day person buys or what time of the year he buys, kind of a thing, which is essentially what is required by a company, whether it's a manufacturing company or any other company, to plan its production process. The upcoming discussions on the privacy front sometimes has a special, you can say, control on the profiling of customers. Now, profiling of customers is important for data-driven organization, but it can have its own problems. So on this security issues on data centralization and this interplay of privacy laws affecting the profiling. How does it affect the building of a data-driven organization, according to you, Shiva?
Okay. See, whatever we spoke, uh, security comes to the first place, irrespective of whether you have your customers' data, or your own data, or your suppliers' data. Securing information is very important now that the entire world is in Pegasus and whatnot. So security plays the utmost priority in any of the, now it has become even the top management talk, or the even at the boardroom talk. So, but if you look at the manufacturing and other industries now, information technology and operational technology convergence is becoming the most vulnerable or the talkable topics across the industry. If you look at the, generally whatever we spoke is all only about the IT data, whatever you are talking about. There is also one more factor which is coming from the operational SCADA related data which is coming in. If you look at the security perspective, this particular OT portion is always obviously with the different teams and technology, and generally IT is different. So when the IT and OT data is coming and converging to deliver some value to the business, obviously there is some security vulnerabilities, and there are lots of things like stucknets and stuff things happened in the past, which have also just visualized it in our own eyes for the past, maybe for the last 15 years. So it is very important to take necessary activities now that there are lots of technology which has come up in terms of uh, you just do a zero trust. You don't trust anyone, just trust whom you know. So that is playing a major role. Security is obviously, it needs to be taken at priority because the data sources at many locations, the source of the data is also not fully or properly secured. If you look at what happens is in the manufacturing setup or the operation and technology setup, the security person, since it was never connected to the internet, or it was never it was, if you look at it, was never a living scenario. If you ask any chair, can you make a chair a livable, it's a kind of living things, obviously you can, because what do you mean by living things? You can speak and you can talk and you can communicate something, so obviously you can put a whatever they tag into the chair, and you can track and you can communicate how far it has traveled and what is the information, keep it can send it to IoT. So it has become a non-living things to it is becoming a living things. So obviously where the security needs to be tightened up at appropriate levels. There is a huge gap in terms of uh, in terms of security in the manufacturing to the normal IT setup. Traditionally, if you look at, I think Saurabh also will vouch for it. If you look at any manufacturing SCADA related systems, the day we install till it is going to end up life, we are not going to do any upgrades. There is nothing
Yeah.
called operator OS upgrade, and there is nothing called security update. So it lives like that. Because if you touch it, not like our normal servers where we can just do a patch update in the evening, maybe downtime we can take it in the night at 12 to night 2 o'clock, a very lean business hours. You can't afford to take the same OS upgrade and OS patch update for the kind of MES system or for the SCADA systems. So that is a major gap, obviously. So now that it is also speaking to the internet and it is also is becoming a living thing, so there is a threat for most of us.
So
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
just
sure. Just before you start, I want to also talk to you about how we talk about security. Now, we recently had this Saudi Aramco having a ransomware demand for 50 million US dollars. Now, in an IT-driven organization, as your dependency on data grows, this risk of ransomware is haunting us. So, how do you handle this security risk, which is directly proportional to being a data-driven organization? Yes, Saurabh. Yeah.
so and I think Shiva touched upon this. Typically, the systems which are installed in the manufacturing setup, they start their life as they are installed, and they get decommissioned as they were installed, right? And that is why traditionally there you will always see in the manufacturing setup there will be two networks, IT network and OT network, right? and you typically segregate them very clearly. Even when you do a Industry 4.0 or an IoT initiative, there will be always a tunnel which is getting formed across the entire manufacturing unit where you are aggregating the data, bringing it to one aggregation point, and transferring that data through a VPN, which is how you secure. So you still keep your entire OT network as segregated as you can, because the number of patches which come out on a Microsoft Windows platform or any other platform for that matter is so high, which you cannot just implement it any manufacturing setup, because the entire ecosystem has to work together, right? The programs which are running on the machines, they have to be tested for these different platforms, AMCs. There are so many complications around it. So the only strategy which works is keep your IT and OT network as much segregated as you can, and that's why you will find a lot of firewalls in a typical manufacturing setup where every mill within a plant will have their own OT network which is secluded by a firewall. And even when you are doing an analytics project and you want to take the data to the cloud or any other way, you get all of data consolidated into one aggregation point, take it onto VPN, and then take it to the cloud. And you never speak back to the machines directly from outside network. It's always you just hear from them and the decisions are made. And that's why I always feel that in a very traditional manufacturing setup, the time is still away where machines will get their own instructions. The decisions are still made with the data, but they are to be implemented by humans.
Yeah, I understand that keeping IT and OT network separate or integrated is one of the challenges which you will be looking at. In fact, in the case of Stuxnet, it was an air gap system buried 150 feet below the ground, but still it got affected. So we never know how the malware gets into an organization. But this challenge of integrating IT and OT is perhaps behind several other things which we discussed, like the cultural difference and who should lead. Now, it should not be that the IT person is interested in AI and ML and he wants the manufacturing this thing to take up the suggestions, but actually the person who is handling the manufacturing and is responsible for the productivity, he should come and ask the IT person what you can do for me to improve my productivity. So this cross interaction between the manufacturing people, that is production controllers, and the IT controllers is very much essential for the purpose of building a productive organization. Mr. Sachin, can you add in your thoughts on to this IT and OT integration versus the easier way of keeping it separate and then working on some middleware to integrate kind of a thing? But the more they integrate, perhaps the better would be the decision, because I think that is the ultimate objective of what we would like to do in a data-driven organization. Yeah, Sachin.
Yeah, maybe I may not have a very good perspective of of the manufacturing or the retail setup, but I agree with Saurabh that how some of these networks you build within the organization to handle various line of work, whether it's to do with something to do with the innovation where you keep on experimenting with all the modern technologies, and as soon as you have it ready, you actually integrate that with your operational network, and it becomes very, very important even for a services company like us, where we have to be on the edge all the time, and we have to be ahead of our customers. And when we are working with, whether it's retail, banking, or maybe even let's say a petrochemical industry, or maybe other professional services firm, we have to be ahead, much ahead of what actually they are thinking. And then we need to constantly innovate, not on the service delivery model, but how do we actually use technologies, whether it's to do with AI, ML, or maybe something to do with, let's say, data coming from IoT. And if we talk about some of the analytics related work, we there also we have to constantly look at how the data is changing its pattern, and how data is changing within the organization, and how we are ingesting that data. How do we look at the overall data pipeline, and then how do we make it to the more meaningful sources? And more importantly, if I go back to one of your questions around the basically around the security. So data actually has become an important asset for everyone. And how do you consume? Where do you store? How do you secure? And then and you make it available when you actually need it, and a more integrated with all integrity maintained. And you mentioned about some of these ransomware attacks, and even and maybe asking for those kind of 50 million kind of a ransom. and and at times, if I go back to what Shiva was also mentioning, people actually do not realize what kind of value they actually have for the data, and and when they have to take certain decisions to make the data secure or make the data available, what kind of investments they have to make.
Yeah. In fact, this inability of the management to sometimes to understand the importance of data and the value of data, so that appropriate say budgets are not provided, is something which is haunting all the information security people. In fact, one of the things which I have been trying to talk to industry is whether we can build visibility to the data value in terms of getting some kind of a number in the balance sheet, which either as a footnote or as a contra entry tells the top management, my company is having $50 million worth data. See, only when this hacker asks you $50 million, you come to know, oh, do we have that much of data which is worth so much? But if the organizational head knew that I have got maybe 100 million worth of data, because these hackers know how much to charge. One credit card data, $100, one health data, $50. See, you have the whole laundry list available in the dark web. They know that, but inside an organization, IS people will be normally talking about risk. But when it goes to the board, they'll say, where is the ROI for me to invest in this? You tell me how much is the potential asset you are going to secure. So bringing data valuation is one of the things which I have been passionately driving. And this coming of the privacy laws is another big hindrance in many of the cases, because I would now go to Sonali about the finance industry, which actually is making excellent use in terms of say credit rating of let us say our users for purpose of lending and other things. Okay, there is one CIBIL. Of course, CIBIL is having something like 100 crore Indians data. They of course have transferred all this data to the control of TransUnion and taking their assistance, and then take some kind of view. IDBI was one of the companies which had equity stake in CIBIL, which they have thought that is useless. So why do we have shares in CIBIL? They sold it to TransUnion. That's again because of the lack of value perception. I recently read that in US there are 2 cases where data was given as collateral during this COVID time for 2 airlines to actually raise money. And in one of both the cases, they found that the value of data was higher than the market capitalization of those companies. So that was the value of data which came as a revelation. In India, we had a case like Net4 India, where data was there, nobody looked at data, and they declared the company as insolvent. So this is one of the issues which is affecting the industry. When people like you go to the management and ask for investment, this lack of understanding of the rupee value of data, because that is the only thing which a CFO will understand. That is the only thing your director will understand. The rest of it is only risk and other things. They will perhaps not even listen to it. So along with that, this profiling, which is being strictly looked at. Now, without profiling, how do I use data in my business decisions, particularly in finance? So I need to have, it is not just for giving advertisements. Say the loan performance is one of the things which I would like to do. So Sonali can perhaps highlight how this changing scenario of the incoming data protection laws, GDPR, and now in India PDPP, is likely to affect this you can say effort to make your company or organization data driven, because people will say, what data? Personal data means I will not touch it. Okay, the moment you profile, there will be somebody who is going to ask questions. Now, how do you as an IT person address this particular challenge?
Okay. Thank you, Navi sir. Actually, touching upon the personal data and non-personal data, I'll give you a small example. See, personal data and non-personal data are complementary to each other in the process of monetization. If you talk about monetization, most of the time, personal data does not have much significance without non-personal data. Having said this, in the world of super personalization, personal data plays a very important role and extremely valuable. Let me give you an example. The study suggests people prefer small ticket size gold loan. I'm giving example from banking side. So people prefer small ticket size gold loan during harvesting season in the certain sectors of India. So there is a no, this is a non-personal information I can say. Now I know Mr. X, whoever he is or she is, as a farming as his profession and lives in that geographical pocket. Immediately as a bank, we can design a propensity model and calculate the repaying capacity. We can send him a campaign message for the gold loan product. So here we are merging both personal and non-personal data to best of the, I mean to derive the best of the result. So I can say there are key factors, couple of key factors which plays an important role in data monetization. So understand the role and the value of the data with respect to our business. As you rightly mentioned, we have to understand the value of the data, the value of the data we have. So it is the data is not only internal data. So as we mentioned, there has to be an amalgamation. So internal data plus external data. Sir has rightly mentioned. So we have not only the internal banking data, we have the whole world of external data. For example, all social media data. They can actually find out what is my affluency score in the external data. They can see how many banking other loans I'm with other banks. Let's consider only with IDBI internal data, I have only one loan. But outside the world, I have five different loans and I'm defaulting at some other banks. But I'm totally good at IDBI bank. So you can immediately predict this customer is going to go I mean bad in couple of months or couple of weeks. So but I'm totally fine with my bank. So you can see from the outside world or maybe a non-personal information as my bank is concerned, like I'm going to go bad. So the outside world data is right now much more important as if you consider as the inside data and how we are going to get it, like how much data is so much data. So as many of the reputed organization has like published, like in 2025, by 2025 every day we are having more than 450 460 gigabyte or exabyte of data we are going to have. So how much data bank or any other organization to actually source from other information, how much is too much? So where to put a full stop, that depends on the culture of the organization plus the maturity level of the maybe the top down approach as you just mentioned. So it all depends. And secondly, the data literacy and data protection, you can say the data protection and data literacy. If you do a forward integration and backward integration, in the backward integration, I think Shiva sir and everyone talked about how we have to take care of the data, how we have to integrate the outside world in the inside world, how the data should be protected. The forward integration is how we can actually go from top down to bottom. It's like, let's consider we are training our data scientists, I mean very continuously, but it is not enough. There are only couple of hundred of people. So entire organization should understand the data security, the existence of data, how to use it, what is the importance. So that is very important. So training the entire organization is not possible on data security or maybe the importance of data. But individuals don't also do like the entire organization should be data scientists. It is like they should understand and ask the right question to a security head, I mean data security head, maybe the CISO, maybe the who is the head of the data analytics. They should ask the right question, then implement the right result on the field. So it is like creating, I mean doing the backward integration, creating the data, the structure of the data, the securitization of the data, how much data is too much data, what is the maturity level my organization can handle data. Second, I mean the culture of the organization from top to bottom, how to actually use the data in a right way. So these two things I think very important.
Thank you, Sonali. I think we are hitting the time schedule.
Okay.
Okay, but I would like to have one round of short answer from each one of you on how do you
Sure.
look at the next 1 or 2 years on how this data-driven culture is likely to go in the area or industry in which you are working. Starting with Kunal.
So, again, like I mentioned before, also, I think it's very important for everyone across the business to kind of come together and understand what is the data that's really needed, what's not really needed for each businesses, and make sure that it's more structured and more refined as you keep going ahead. Like you also rightly mentioned, is there an ROI around data security and things like that in the retail industry? Luckily, we have got PCI DSS compliance and all of that to kind of take care of. So that helps in working with businesses, for creating an ROI and things like that. So, but yeah, that's where we are. I think the businesses need to come together and define a case around all of that.
Yeah, Saurabh, immediate next 2 years, how is it going to affect?
It's going to change the way how businesses work, and I think if it is top driven, the reviews are getting done, the decisions are getting done on the basis of data. It will make a difference in the people who are using data and who are not using the data. They will be differentiated in the way how they perform in future.
Thank you. Shiva, your thoughts on the future?
See, I think again depends on the industry, the data-driven model, the kind of implementation happens. Since it's in the EPC industry, generally what happens is currently people will have whatever they do, just do the postmortem. What has happened? Why it has happened? So maybe in a maturity level, kind of what is happening and why it is happening, and maybe there is a earlier remediation can take place. So that I think it's what you call it as managed and measured. In the if you look at the maturity models, maybe at the third level or fourth level we can reach in a couple of years in this industry per se.
Very good. Sachin, as a consultant, how do you look for next 2 years?
In fact, when you asked that question, I was thinking something else. On a lighter note, there was a message going on that all the people who have been fully vaccinated, they will die in 2 years. I don't know whether we will be there to witness data explosion or not. And yesterday again, I read another article where somebody mentioned that humans will disappear by 2027 from the earth. I think all these factors are making us more concerned about the other facts. But coming back to the questions, I think the potential of data has been realized by almost all the sectors, and how the data has been accumulated, how data is making sense to the growth of their businesses, how data is actually helping them to make the organization more productive and efficient, and how data is actually helping being compliant. And I could relate to when Kunal was mentioning about the PCI DSS, for example, for his industry. But I know some of the organizations, large organizations, MNCs, who are probably listed on some international stock exchanges, how they actually have to comply, how the data is actually helping them to be more, showing more compliances to different standards, how data is actually helping to do that entire risk management, analytics. This, I think, is going to help the organization more. And as I think you also rightly captured, the potential of the data, I think everybody is aware, whether it's banking, manufacturing, retail, and how they can actually tweak some of these things, whether it is during some peak season or maybe during certain events. And I think that's going to stay and going to grow.
Thank you. We'll have the final word from Sonali. In banking segment, how is it? How does it look? Is it optimistic in the next couple of years?
Yes, of course, optimistic. I'll touch on 2 points: establishing and managing an ever-growing volume of structured and unstructured information of various format. Finally, managing the quality to the highest level, and compliance is key, as just Kunal mentioned. Second, managing the skill gap and embed data fluency across the enterprise. I can see these 2 important points to be, a key important point for next 2 years.
Thank you. We had 5 experts, so obviously even if another 1 hour is there, we could have had discussions. But anyway, thank you for sharing all your thoughts. Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you, Shiva, Sachin, and Sonali.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.